Recording.
Recording is on.
Yeah. So you can start from the top, Pedro. Hello? Hello?
Yeah, my bad.
Yeah, yeah.
I muted the mic. Right. So
Okay.
we're talking about validating SOPs and trying to determine whether SOPs are fake or fraudulent, and what we should be expecting from GECOM, the Guyana Elections Commission, to be producing with these SOP documents. We know that the PPPC has uploaded their copies of SOPs online, and I've downloaded those copies here. As you can see, this is their downloaded copy that I got from March 5th. I do know that they've been updating their archive and updating their provided Excel sheet as well. And so I'm not sure whether they've included SOPs that I haven't found in this archive to date, but I'm working with this. Now, the thing about SOPs is that each SOP, let me pull up the second one here. Each SOP has several features on them that people have alluded to be in security features on these documents. And their SOP documents are not domestically printed or reproduced. They're documents that are produced in a different country and procured through the Guyana elections and distributed through the Guyana Elections Commission. So several things about the SOP document in terms of trying to figure out whether an SOP is legitimate or not is that you look at the so-called security features on these SOPs. But one that really stands out is the unique ID that's embedded on each SOP. If an SOP is likely to be fraudulent, it should not carry the same unique ID that we're seeing here. In fact, if I were to replicate an SOP, I would be making copies of an SOP and putting numbers in and forging signatures and all that. But if one goes through the archive provided by the PPP, you can determine whether these SOPs that I'm looking at are copies of copies. Because what these SOPs should be illustrated is a copy of an original statement of poll that was done and prepared at the polling station. And these documents that are prepared at polling stations, the original will be retained by the Guyana Elections Commission, and copies will be reproduced and given to political representatives, as well as a copy will be posted at the front, usually at the front of the polling station. Like in this case, we're looking at an SOP that was prepared at Dora Primary School. So I have in possession several images, probably well over 250, over 300 SOP images taken from polling stations throughout the country. And anyone who is interested in validating or invalidating SOPs from the PPP's uploaded archive, they can easily look at an SOP posted at the polling station and comparing it with what the PPP has produced. Now, one of the important things to note is that an SOP document is originally a GECOM document. This is not a party document. This is not someone else's document. This is not a returning officer's document. This is a document that belongs to GECOM. It's procured by GECOM. It's distributed by GECOM. And any copy that gets disseminated from or through GECOM, it has to match up with the original print or the original copy. The process of tabulating votes at the polling station incorporates the GECOM presiding officer to be present, which we see in this SOP to be an individual named, and party representatives and other officials who are representing GECOM who may be present. They also would be there to witness the formal tabulation of the ballots cast at any specific polling station. So these individuals highlighted. We have the GECOM presiding officer, and we have party representatives. And here, of course, is the polling station. The box number is basically the ballot box that represents the region that this box is casted in. In this case, a 4000 series box represents region 4. And this is box 5 of region 4 at Dover Primary School. Polling division numbers are less important for this purpose, but a polling station number basically ties into the polling station. In this case, Dover Primary School. That's the unique ID that ties into the polling station. So the tabulation of votes is done in the presence of party representatives and a GECOM official. And they physically count each vote cast for a party, and they tabulate it on this sheet, the statement of poll. Those values are populated in this section, right? Very straightforward process. The integrity of the results for each party is ensured by the presence of party representatives and other GECOM officials who may be present. So even though we may have one presiding officer in this case, you may have other GECOM representatives presiding over a specific polling station, and they may put their signatures as witnesses. On top of this, there will be observers who make up domestic and international organizations who are witnessing this tabulation process. So the tabulation process should mirror what should be occurring at GECOM with the returning officer in the presence of those eligible, meaning party representatives and observer groups. And what we see on this statement of poll and the figures that we've amounted as total valid votes on this statement of poll casted for each party, it's the same process GECOM should be emulated when it comes to the returning officer tabulating the total votes cast in favor of each party. It's the same identical process. Now, the tabulation of votes is not a complicated thing. It's basically adding up values, the Constitution and the representative of the People's Act, Article 84(1), clearly highlights what the process entails, and it specifically mentions the term adding up. So, I mean, there's nothing confusing or complex about this process. You can give this to kids in primary school to do this for homework, and I'm sure it would help them with their mathematics. So that's the general flow of what makes up a statement of poll, what constitutes a statement of poll, and the features that you would want to look for on this document. As a side note, the date of the election is also important, because if you're reusing statements of polls from a prior election, the date should not match. The year, of course, is printed. So this is not something you can write onto. If it is a document that shows a date changed, that's hard printed, then you have something that might be dubious there. So all of these things must be consistent, and they all must follow the necessary protocols to get a statement of poll legitimized. Now,
Yeah, it also must be stated too that as relates to the statement of polls, these many security features are there to ensure that this document is basically sacrosanct. And
yeah,
the fact that somebody would actually apply their signature towards it, it
yes,
basically tells you that the person actually in their validation has said that this information here is correct and they agree to everything there.
right,
So it is also, I think, very important, and I think you mentioned it before, that the regional officer, his work is basically to ensure that this is actually valid and there isn't any fake statement to polls passing through. This is the machinery that would be called GECOM. So all of these things are there to ensure that this document here is something that somebody could basically live or die by. So
exactly,
the importance cannot be understated, and these are all important things to go through. And we can
precisely,
see from here that generally I would at least expect that the document itself in its final state, you wouldn't see that many scratches appearing, because that's something that I actually see a lot. People scratching out digits and putting in that digit, and that is what sometimes leads to confusion
yes,
among the statement of polls within itself. So generally, these documents here should be like just like this one here from Dora. You don't really see any scratches or any connotations or anything. This is all it should be. All
yes.
right. Yeah.
Exactly. So for those who are bringing up the argument that we can't trust a party's statements of poll, I mean that argument is can easily be addressed by going to polling stations and invalidating the statements of polls produced by party representatives if you don't trust their copies. But one
I
of the
must say
things, mhm,
that is also a
mhm,
constitutional right. It is your right to go there and actually look at the SOP if you want, and that is why it is always published at an area that is not conspicuous, so that everybody could see where it is and so on. So, a next thing that was quite alarming is that I have heard statements that the people were not allowed into schools and so on to see the SOPs by guards and so on and so forth. But that in itself is illegal, and the entire country has a right to see the SOPs anywhere in the country once it's there.
yes,
So yeah, you can continue.
no, but that's very important. I mean, the whole point of the system is to ensure that the public has trust in their institutions and trust in their political representatives. That no one is trying to uh, uh, change or modify or manipulate the system or process or documents. And the easy way to do it is just go to your polling station and invalidate what they're saying if you can. And if you can't invalidate what they're saying, then you have reason to trust what they're producing. It's that simple, really. And I don't know why this argument that we can't trust PPP's statements of polls, but we can trust GCOMs when there's a nonpartisan, non-biased source available, which is the statements of polls posted up at polling stations.
Exactly, because I would side with people who say that they can't necessarily trust PvP's
Mhm.
SOP in
Mhm.
the argument that PvP is indeed a political party and there's some bias. So the onus is basically upon you to go and
Mhm.
prove PvP's SOP wrong.
Right.
Go, you have your own SOP from your own area, because even myself have SOP from my area and I validated them with what PvP had and they were correct. So with that now, I know for sure that my vote in essence was tabulated there. So
Yes.
with that now, if you feel that this is not so, or this is not shouldn't be so or so, you can go easily get your SOP and compare it. And
Right.
even so, actually posit that online and show that, well, this is my SOP that I collected. This is what the PvP SOP had. Well, there's discrepancy here, so I don't believe in PvP. Okay, well, this is correct. I believe in the PvP SOPs. It's that simple. And if there's that, I think legally you can actually prosecute somebody for falsifying SOP. I think so, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm not a liar, I must say, so I wouldn't delve into that territory. But if
Mhm.
you have reason to believe that there's fraud on the account of party X or party Y, you can take that to GECOM and they will know exactly what to do. But the problem that we see here is that GECOM themselves have some amount of compromise. So that is
Mhm.
why the honest now is upon you more so to go ahead and validate what you had or what you have not had.
Yes, precisely. And one of the things that I've done is get SOPs from people on the ground who were able and willing to get access to these polling station and produce copies posted at the front of these polling stations. Because, like I said, they're your best, most trustworthy source of statements of polls if you don't trust GCOM or any political party. And one of the things I want to show is that, these copies that I'm getting, or these photos of SOPs that I'm getting from people on the ground, I can trust them because these are two, I mean, these are people that I trust on the one hand, and on the second hand, um, I could look at, uh, for like in this case, with this box number here, I can look at two sorts of photos taken from this SOP. This is 4301, and they were sent by two different individuals. And I can do a compare and contrast between these two documents to know that, this is something I'm getting for sure from the polling station. So two different cameras, two different persons, same SOP produced. All right. And so this box here, now here's where you can invalidate the uh, PPP's uploaded SOP if you think that their copies are bogus. So you look at the features, like I mentioned. You look at the signature section. You look at the presiding officer. Um, and you look at the tallying of votes for political parties. And then you look at the box number here, 4301, and we go into their archive. We're going to go into their archive. I think that was it for 4301. Now, one of the things that people who dive into this archive will notice is that in some cases you wouldn't find an SOP valid document scan and contained here in the archive. But that's fine because at the end of the day, the PPP is reporting that their uploaded spreadsheet, which I have open here, mirrors the SOP values that they've uploaded and they've been able to acquire and populate these fields with. So in this case, I can't find the SOP for what's the box again? 30, oops, wrong window. 304301. Okay, great. So I'm gonna look on the Excel sheet. This is actually a modified version that I've done some modification to this sheet, but mostly it's intact from the PPP's original. But let's look for 301. I'm gonna look at the values here. And for this box number 4301, for APNU, it has 140 votes, and for PPP, it has 0. I'm going to look at the polling station copies that I have.
For
I,
just a bit of clarity, I must say that the modifications that were made to the Excel spreadsheet were
Mhm.
based on a methodology of simplifying what is there, so it would have been easier for us to understand.
Right, and
Just to ensure that
we've
there isn't
also
any problem. People might go and jump on the assertion that we actually input values and so on, but that is not
yeah,
true.
but we did in fact modify I think about maybe 3 or 4 fields
Yeah,
that
that
had
was from
incorrect values.
Yeah, that was from the Plendila secondary school or nursery school or something.
Yeah.
The FPs that I actually got to you.
Yeah, but it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. I'll show, I'll illustrate why it doesn't matter anyway. Even if the values are inaccurate. Well, the few values are inaccurate, but like I said, we found only like about 4 discrepancies that did not correspond with SOP values, and we've corrected that. So on my copy that you see here, I have those corrections. But in this example, we're corresponding polling station SOP with PPP's results on their Excel sheet. So you do this and you do see a correspondence. So it does corroborate the Excel sheet what the polling station has. And that's important. That means that we have a good value, we have good values here, and we can trust these values. Now we can move on to SOPs that did not correspond. I have one here as an example. Now, when I did my initial investigation, I found that the values for box number 4014, these values did not correspond with the actual SOP. So I've made those adjustments, and I've noted that I've made an adjustment for this specific box. So there are a few of those. Like this is the second one. The ones without colors, I've made an update. Let's see here. So yeah, so originally in this example, box number 4021, the numbers that were originally there was numbers from the regional SOP, not the general, because we're tabulating the general. Ideally, that's what we want. So that's the process, and if you can find polling station SOPs that you can correspond with, all the better. It means that the archive copies are consistent with what polling stations have. And of course, I'm not going to go through 8 hours of work, which I did to get my sheet updated, get my copy of the sheet updated, and to give me some sort of idea of what the actual results would look like. But this is just to give you an exercise that anyone can do and falsify the data that we're seeing if they wish. So this is another example of 4112. These are the values posted up at the polling station. We're going to pull up the Excel sheet. 4112. And we see that, and we're only focusing PPP and APNU at the moment, but you can look at the the smaller parties if you wish. So APNU 130, PPP 101, and we're gonna look at that image here. So APNU 130, PPP 101. And you do this until you reach a point, either you get the entire all of the boxes covered, but in some cases you may not. There's some SOPs that are not uploaded in the PPP's archive, but you would need to go out in the field and get the polling station results to correspond. But I'm gonna go further to look at 4112 in the PPP's archive to see if it matches up. So I'm gonna go here. And we're gonna try to look for 4112, which is this one here. And it does match up. 130, 101. Once again, this is the actual copy posted on the polling station. 130, 101. If you look at the handwriting, I mean, all of this you can look at if you want to dive a bit more into the forensics of this. So you can look at the handwriting features to see if it corresponds. And you can look at the presiding officer to see if they correspond. Ashina Edwards. So this is the exercise I've been doing, and I'm sure quite a few folks are doing, but not as many. Hopefully more people do this sort of exercise so that they can falsify what political parties are saying, falsify what GECOM is saying, and really and truly, you can't get any better than going to your polling station and looking at the results. And if they don't match, then that should raise an alarm. Um,
So just one interjection here.
mhm.
The problem is that I would have really hoped that a lot of people would actually have gone to their polling station at night after the elections would have been finished, or at least the morning after, to actually ascertain their the SOP from the polling station, because currently there's a lot of problems finding SOPs. A lot of them are actually discarded and torn off of areas and so on. So
Right.
the
That's
importance
very
right
worrying.
now, it is kind of like hard to get them, but if even so if you go to some places, you would still get it. So I would encourage individuals to still try and see if you can't get your SOPs up.
Yeah.
Legally, I don't think there should be any problems with it still being up at this point in time.
Hmm. These are just a few that I have in my copies here, but I do have more. I have a lot, like over 200 samples of SOPs. There are 879 SOPs for Region 4, and if you can get them all, even better. But based on the sample size that I've seen and the corrections that I've done, I can trust this Excel sheet that I have here. I can trust it. Um, but Excel sheets are not supposed to be relied on. There's a bit of a contention that the returning officer can choose what method of tabulation he wishes to use, but method of tabulation is not the same as source. And if you're going to use a pre-populated Excel sheet such as this one to tabulate votes, you're using a source. You're not using a method. And that's very important to distinguish. And of course, the Chief Justice recognized this difference, and the article in question from the Representative People's Act also,
Representation of the people.
yeah, Representation of the People's Act also mentioned clearly um, that SOPs are the only source data that you can use, source documents that you can use. You can't use um, an Excel sheet or a Word document or anything that has numbers already populated on them. You can't use those as sources, and they're not methods of tabulating. They're a spreadsheet, a Word document, or even a piece of pen and paper with rows and columns. Those are methods. Those are ways you want to summarize your values and produce maybe an overall result, but those are not sources. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Oh, well, I echo the same sentiments because I think it all holds true. The reality is that there's a process, and this process is a process that has been used for years in verification of these things. Norms are not legally binding, but a norm is something that someone should hold on to if this norm is what actually has bring clarity to a lot of things. So with the SOPs, the arrow is required to display the SOPs so everyone could see the SOP. And also, it would then tabulate the SOPs. One cannot be used in a spreadsheet without seeing the SOPs because that in itself brings a very contagious situation
Exactly.
whereby if you hijack 9 arrows, you can win the election basically. Or even so, if you hijack in this situation, if you hijack the arrow for region 4, you can actually win the election. And that is not how the elective process should be, because that brings into consideration 9 persons once they're in a certain position could basically bring a nation to its knees if they actually want. And I don't believe that that should be the way of doing things. So Basically, this arrow and the status of the arrow, in my assumption, is to ensure that the votes of the people are counted and tabulated. The tabulating process
Yeah.
would entail basically just saying, okay, 30 persons from Dora voted for X. I'll just go and tally up that 30 into X. 30 persons from my Coney Bridge voted for Y. 30 persons from different areas,
Right.
and you add that up. Your 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 position as a regional officer is not to basically just dream up of figures and insert them in a spreadsheet and call it gospel. I do not support that in any way.
And the funny thing is, right, and this goes back to the point I raised initially, that the process of tabulating done at the polling station, it mirrors the process that should be ongoing in GECOM in presence of those eligible. The only difference is that what the polling station did was that that tabulation process involved actual ballots. And those actual ballots are summarized in front of representatives and observers and recorded on this statement of poll. Now, the job for the RO is to get the summarized tabulation of ballots for each polling station recorded on the statement of poll. Um, he needs to just ensure that there are no discrepancies, because that process is a very sensitive process. There,
Indeed,
there are a lot of avenues, a lot of weaknesses. Some people call it loopholes, but really and truly, there are weaknesses in positions, and a lot of the positions rely on um, an honorary system of some sort, whereby someone who's empowered to, make the final declaration or make the final ruling, it's ultimately them you have to respect, and you have to trust that their integrity is intact, and you have to trust that what they say mirrors what the data is saying. That's one of the flaws that I find with the empowerment that the sort of empowerment that the returning officer possesses. But we know very well that the process is to help alleviate concerns of that nature,
yes,
concerns of distress, concerns of,
and
oh.
that is what our entire electoral procedure is seeking to do. Because
Mhm.
the reality is that we have a history of bad things happening, of things manifesting, and so on. So I think the crafters of the Constitution itself and the updates that they have made to it is to try their best to ensure that there's clarity within this
Mhm.
entire electoral process. And for
No.
people who try to distort this process, it creates the situation whereby people don't trust the process, and it is very sad if you can't trust in a process of electing someone, and then it's going to just bring a lot of chaos within everyone, and that's the state that we are currently in.
Yeah, exactly. And it is disappointing that we're, what, 3 weeks in and we can't get any sort of um, moving forward progress. There's nothing. We're just stuck at this contention of SOPs still, despite a court ruling, and it's ridiculous that we're still stuck at this stage. But one of the things I want to highlight is that these colored fields that I have here, these are rows that I was not able to validate because I don't have any SOP records, and the sheet provided by the PPP, they're empty. Like, well, most of them are empty. Actually, some of them are empty. So these are empty. These are all empty. These are not populated. Some, though, I did find SOP copies for. So, like, for instance, this one here, 4274. I was able to get this SOP box from the archive, and I just populated here. This one, Right, so this one I have missing SOP to correspond. So I can't correspond the data that was originally here, but I reset the values to 0 because this is just me saying to myself that I want the actual values. I just don't want to rely on what the spreadsheet is saying. But there were values here populated, but I've reset them to 0 for these two parties. There are others as well. Like, let's see here. So one of the things I've done is that, given the fact that I don't have SOPs to correspond most of these, and I have some SOPs which I've inputted, like this one for instance, these two for instance, right? I've inputted these values based on SOP copies that I have. And as you can see, these are numbers that favor the APNU, not the PPP, right? So one thing I did is that I look at the number of electors registered at these polling stations, and I add them up, and I get that value. I'm going to take this value and I'm going to put it aside. I have that already separated on this Excel sheet here. But I'll come back to why I'm separating this value of total electors for boxes that I cannot account for. If I select all, and they've done a good job with this Excel sheet, but if I come here, there's a gray row. I mean, you can filter by color as well, but there's a gray row that shows the total summary of electors and votes cast in favor of each political party. And these numbers are numbers that should correspond with statements of polls. Now, you take the numbers for each district, East Bank, South Georgetown, you take all of those summarized numbers and you plug them over here. So this is East Bank. Well, these are corrected numbers, as they're not gonna mirror exactly the same as the original file, because these are figures that I was able to correct, but they're still marginally insignificant. Like, it doesn't matter if you use the existing numbers that the PPP has produced or not. They're still insignificant. But for argument's sake, I put the numbers that I've been able to add up. That's East Bank, places like South Georgetown, North Georgetown, and East Coast, the 4 districts of Region 4, and you add them up. When you add them up, this is roughly the value you get, which is not far off from what the PPP has been stating on their website and in their press conferences, that these are the values that they get. But like I said, there are rows that are not populated. So, some of these are not populated. Some are, but some I can't really attest to because I don't have SOPs to correspond with the values here. But as I was saying, for argument's sake, add up the total electors. And we know these are strongholds for the APNU. These are strongholds for the APNU. We can give the APNU all of them, not a cent to the PPP. We can give the APNU all of them. And we can plug that figure into the 114,438 that we get from summarizing figures there. And I'm going to try to do that just to illustrate. So, oops. So we have 6129. 4. When you add this up, that's the total you get. So we have 879 SOPs for region 4. We have copies of SOPs provided by one political party. We have samples of statements of polls from polling stations to corroborate whether the party's scanned and uploaded copies correspond and are legitimate. And we also have the ability to look through some of these scanned copies to determine whether they are legitimate by looking at both regional and general statements of polls. And it should match with the presiding officer. It should match with the signature of the presiding officer and those present. So these things should match. And this is one of the good things about looking at regional and general statements of polls, right? In some cases, you may have representatives there for the general tabulation, but not there for the regional tabulation. So some signatures might not have those representatives there. Maybe the left, I know of this, people leave in after tabulating the general, and they don't want to sit around for the regional, so they leave. But nevertheless, you'll always have one party rep, one GECOM official, and one party rep of each contended side, and at least one GECOM official present. I know you've, but I'll come back to that shortly. Let me just finish up this demonstration here. So each row represents a ballot box, and we have 879. When you add them up and you tally them up, and I give the remaining dubious boxes all to the APNU, you get this figure. When you tally up the PPP's figures with the official declared results that hasn't had any problems, they're not contentious. These results are not contentious. So everyone agreed to them. There were no problems. These are 9 regions verified. These are 9 regions that have been flawlessly executed during the.
Yeah, just one interjection there.
Mhm.
Some regions there were contentious,
Mhm.
contingents. The regions 5 and 6 were actually asked for a recount by the APNU. It
Mhm.
must be noted. However, they have basically accepted the results in its
Mhm.
totality.
Right.
Hence, their position currently with everything.
Only
So
recount. Mhm.
yeah, they requested 2 recounts for region 5 and 6. I remember
Right.
clearly. Yeah. So they
But we don't really know if it's because they were doubtful of the number, because they did not raise any alarms during the tabulation process. They only brought up the recount after Region
yeah, that's
4's
correct. That's
contentious,
correct.
right?
That's
So
correct.
so we gotta try to figure out why. I mean, we should probably just leave it up in the air. Why would they all of a sudden want to recount without no objections during the tabulation process? So we'll leave that up in the air. But for the argument's sake that we're trying to demonstrate here is that the 2 numbers in blue, this row being APNU and this row being PPP, these are officially declared numbers, and for the most part, they're not disputed numbers. And you add these numbers up, you get 232,372 for PPP, roughly. And you get, well, I just tabulated what the Excel sheet put here. So, but if you put the 120 instead of the, let's just do it for argument's sake. You put this here. Oops, wrong paste. Let me just type in. My mouse is being a bit weird. All right, so this is what you get. APNU with 221, 249. Roughly, this is what the actual results would look like, I believe. And the PVP 232, 372, roughly. Now, it takes a large number for the APNU to overcome the PPP's figure there that you see there. And it would take a large number that would need to be in favor of the APNU for them to take the lead without increasing any value in favor of the PPP. So, so far, what did we do? We give dubious remaining electors and assume that all of them would support APNU. And we added that up, and we have this total value, 221, 249. And we still don't see any significant lead. But the only way we will get a significant lead is if we make up numbers. That's the only way. And we have to make up a tremendous amount of whole number for the APNU to gain a lead, a majority lead. But I don't see it as physically possible because, like I said, there are 879 polling stations. There are 879 boxes, and you have a fixed amount of registered electors for each box. You have a fixed amount of valid votes cast for each box. And even if you were to pretend that, your Excel sheet, though missing some box values or have numbers that, don't seem to correspond with what you have in your SOP archive or polling station copies, you still need to make up a large amount of number for them to take the lead. And I cannot imagine how it would be possible. It would be impossible given the parameters of this election.
And I of course agree with that. So the reality is that ideally, if an electoral proceeding went correctly and there wasn't contentious over contention, sorry, over
Yeah.
we wouldn't have been seeing all of these elaborate displays and so on in the country. There would have been a methodology of which we could have used to verify that. But basically, with the position that the APNUs found themselves in, it is very hard to prove not so. So they have to go ahead and do things in a route that would try its best to stymie away from the facts of everything. So that is the reality. It is very hard for me to see why we're playing this game, and I do believe that we should just stop it. So
we have to. It's embarrassing. It's very embarrassing that they're sticking to constructed narratives that make no sense and have no basis with the actual reality of the results. And they're just making it worse.
The reality too. If there's a big contention with the SOPs that were produced by the PVP, it is very easy for you to disprove these things.
Yeah.
You could and they have a lot of SOPs because I remember very vividly Mr. Duncan was posting some SOPs, Mr. Bond was posting SOPs. Let us see where there are variations from those SOPs in comparison to the SOPs that were given that was actually published by the PVP. Let us see. It is very simple. You compare those to what you have, And if there are differences, highlight them. Show us that PvP is this exact monster that you have already shown us they can be. So
Uh,
it is very easy.
yeah,
Sure.
unfortunately, easy is not what these
Yeah,
politicians
because
want.
it becomes hard. It becomes hard when you're trying to like basically officiate the entire process.
Mhm. And look, we're living in a very different generation. We have very critical minds coming up in Guyana right now, and people are not going to swallow um, any and anything, especially young people in particular. They're not going to swallow any and anything that you bring to them. They're going to be skeptical. They're going to be a bit more curious to know whether what they're hearing is in any way the truth. And a lot of people are hungry for the truth of this situation. And I've received a lot of uh, uh, messages from people who would like to see um, what could possibly be causing this. And I strongly believe this is what's causing the political impasse, the deadlock that we're in. And the only way out is, someone's going to have to take a bold step and say, let's just do the right thing. I know a lot of people are relying on a recount to neutralize what's happened, what's occurred, and probably pretend that nothing has ever happened, nothing has occurred. But we need to start putting consequences in place. It's the only way we're going to ensure integrity is protected. And
Indeed,
can't,
indeed.
we can't
And
keep
not
defending
only
this.
not only the integrity is actually for this election, but for the future elections. Because what is
Yeah.
it to tell us that, let's say, PvP gets into power, PvP can't do this again, or even self APN gets into power, APN can't do this again. We should not move on from this situation until in its totality it's dealt with, because
Exactly.
we cannot allow our nation to run into this scenario again. This also happened at probably the worst time ever. There's a pandemic that is going on, and we can't figure out these simple things, much less figuring out how to cope with the pandemic itself. And it's just delaying what could have already been done. If the right process was followed, by now we would have had a president, there would have been a government, there would have been a parliament involved. We haven't had budgets in probably almost 2 years now.
Mhm.
That could have already been something that is processing. So it creates a very chaotic situation, and it needs resolution. And not only that, it needs resolution, it needs proper resolution so it wouldn't happen again. Because it's embarrassing to me as a Guyanese that we have to go to the CARICOM and ask them to come and help us out with something as simple as an election. It is
Mhm.
embarrassing. And this is not the first time we're actually going to. We went to them with the CCJ for the no confidence motion, trying to prove that Torta 4 is more than Torta 2 is actually more than Torta 4 and so on. We cannot be doing these things.
Mhm.
We as a nation are over 50 years old. You're telling me 50 years and we can't even fix a simple thing as an election? The colonialists and the colonizers are laughing at us, and we should not be allowing those things to happen. We have currently found ourselves in a very progressive situation. I should say the mere having oil itself, it brings problems. But if we can't get an election right, we can't get oil right.
You can get anything right, but more importantly, if if you're against any specific political party or their representatives, um, then this is something that you shouldn't support. You shouldn't support any potential undermining of the democratic framework at all. And the reason why is that once you give support of any potential undermining, then it legitimizes those who want to gain the upper hand in political office to use any and any measure that they so desire, and they can exploit systems if they want. They can. We're setting precedents for these activities, and if we can't stand up for it holistically, universally, then what's the point of democracy? What's the point of law? What's the point of of anything, any structure in place, and we have to,
And that, and
you know,
that's the reality, because the persons who are actually in support of these things are very nearsighted people. Yes, let's say that you actually support this basically rigging of the election. It should be called out as it is. If you
yeah,
support this, what is it to tell you that in the next 5 years, if this government does not do what you wanted them to do, they can't run again and go back into power?
yeah, it means that you have a government that will always be sustained by any measure possible, whether
Exactly.
it is just or unjust, legal or illegal. It doesn't matter because today we're justifying why anything goes. Anything can go. Like you can't follow process. That's okay. We have law on our side to protect and conceal these irregularities, as some have described it. But look, if at the end of the day, democracy should be an open project. It should be an open society with contending views, contending beliefs, and the only way you're going to defeat um, tyrants or demagogues or people that you don't like is by participating in that democratic structure and competing against the ideas that you don't support. Um, and that's how it's always been for most democratic nations. You debate, you have dialogue, you have discussions, and you refute arguments proposed by people who you don't trust or who you believe would not be a good choice or a good um, um, leader to take a hand where it needs to be. And the only way you can do that is within the democratic framework. But once you operate outside of the democratic framework and you have these authoritarian um, ideas and procedures and mechanisms in place and they're being endorsed by people, we're asking for trouble. We're asking not for democracy. We're asking for something completely different. So I would end it there. And
Yeah.
so for people who have been looking at our little clip here or a little demonstration, this is Ferlin, and this is alongside what Michael Philander, right?
Yeah, Michael Philander. So
Yeah.
one final
Mhm.
note I would like to add is that people must realize that if we go down this road of basically electing somebody that is not democratic in a sense,
Mhm.
when dictatorships start, if you think that removing people using democratic processes are hard, when dictatorship starts, people take decades to remove them. So we need to stop this thing now. And if we don't stop it now, we are putting ourselves in danger of becoming basically a chaos in everything. So
Mhm.
I again would advise people to at least let good sense prevail. And the reality is that you as a citizen have the power of verifying these things. You can go ahead and try if there's not an SOP, well, you
Yeah,
can't verify. But you can
it's not
ascertain from somebody
complicated.
else
No.
to verify it. So
It,
the doc basically stops it, but you
yeah.
to get your own self acquainted with what is going on.
If you're a supporter of the coalition, ask them for SOPs because I can't get their copies. But it's not important because I have the polling station, which is the ultimate prime source. So I don't need to depend on political
And,
parties.
and
But
additionally, I must just say quickly too that if you're a supporter of the APNU and you have all confidence that the APNU won the election and you want to verify that for yourself, ask them questions. Ask
mhm.
them questions. Because these same questions that we have been asking for verification of statement of polls and so on, you can go ahead and ask them. This is the party that you actually support and so on. You can. It is very okay for you to ask them that. Hey, you know what? These people are saying that we did not win this election. Can you show me your SOP so I can compare it to X SOP? And if there's a difference between the SOPs, you have all right to believe in what you believe. There's
Yeah.
absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Mhm.
Nothing wrong with that. And you can go ahead now and debunk claims that they won the election and so on. you have all right to do that because you have some sort of evidence and some sort of proof to support what you're saying.
I see we're joined by someone else.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know if they have a microphone. Um,
Actually, yeah, I do. I'm just listening into you guys.
oh, okay.
Okay.
Hey.
But I have a question I want to ask because I've been following what's been happening in my country. But the thing is with this SOP,
Uh-huh.
is this a triplicate copy or is it something that each party writes on their own?
Michael, you
Yeah.
can go ahead and address that.
Okay. So basically, the SOP itself is basically a document of how the tabulation of the votes went for specific ballot box. So
Mhm.
let's say that let's say you voted at the Ogle Community Center. At the end of the day, which is would probably end at the electoral day or the voting day, which is at 6 p.m. That's 18 hours.
Oh,
The presiding officer, along with observers and along with party agents, would go ahead now and count all of the ballots that would have been made, all the votes that
Michael,
were made.
Michael, do me a favor. You could stop the recording so that we can follow up with this gentleman. What's your name?
my name is Sean Osborne.
Okay, cool.